house. But the problem...
Welcome to Eye to the Sky, the UFO Synopsis. Now here's your host, Andrew.
I guess we're right on. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Eye to the Sky, the UFO Synopsis, here on the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, now being broadcast live on UPRN 105.5 in New Orleans. My name's David Andrew, and my wife, the normal host of this show, Andrew, has graciously allowed me to take over the airwaves and have a friend on as a guest. And my guest tonight is Joe Montaldo. You guys all know him as the host of UFO Undercover, also broadcast on this network on Wednesday evenings. Joe's been investigating abductions in at least 25 years or more, probably 25 plus years. He's co-founder of ICAR, which is the International Community for Alien Research. And as I said, he was also the host of his own radio show, UFO Undercover. He's also owner-operator of the UFO Paranormal Radio Network. And to top it all off, he's a contactee abductee. Good evening, Joe.
Oh, thanks for the intro, Joe. You can see I'm waving at you, but y'all can't see that.
Joe, first I'd kind of touch on some UFO-related stuff that's been, making the rounds lately, and some of that is the pictures and the videos that have come out of New York of what turned out to be balloons. I know you've seen a lot of postings on it on Facebook, same as I have. A friend of ours, Frank Warren, I once asked him a question, is any, brain farting here, is any publicity good publicity? And his quick answer was no. And I agree with him on that. And I think this thing going on in New York is a good example of that. Because it seems as though, a lot of these people saw this and they're like, what the hell is that? What is that? What is that? Well, I saw the videos probably the same as you have, and it wasn't really that hard to notice that they were balloons.
That was a thing for me.
I'm just wondering how did this help? Did this help ufology in any way, shape, or form?
See, that's the thing. When, who was it? I forgot who it was. It might have been Lily, ICAR State Director in New York. Somebody sent me the original photo, and I looked and I said, kind of blurry, but I'm seeing individual circles. But, I left it on because, I try to stay out of the UFO stuff as much as I can because I got too much other stuff going on. And then a couple of days later, not even that, about a day later, someone actually had sent me a photo that had been cleaned up, cropped and cleaned up a little bit. And it was pretty obvious, but look, I'm not the UFO expert, so I'll leave it to them. But what bothered me about all of this was, first I seen these. Then I seen the school teachers on, was it MSNBC? One of the news stations had the school that supposedly released the balloons, the accidental releasing of the balloons. Now, someone sent me a thing that said the balloons stood still for 15 hours. I haven't been able to find that anywhere in any legitimate news source. If y'all got it, send it to us, okay, guys? Because both Dave and I are interested in this. But then I seen another very famous ufologist put a post on Facebook about, well, it didn't really look like balloons to me. And then there was another post about another famous ufologist, which I really want to say her name, but I'm not going to. I'm having a hard time with this one. That said that they're doing this big investigation on it. And I know what they're going to say. They're going to say it wasn't balloons, but right now I'm going with the balloons. Now, I know New York Lily's up there working on this. Mm-hmm. If she sends me some evidence and suggests otherwise, I'm not beyond changing my mind about stuff, but at this point I'm kind of leaning towards the balloons. But like I said, I haven't done that much research on it, so y'all don't hate on me if I'm wrong.
Okay, well, maybe it's just me then. I've looked at tons and tons and tons of UFO stuff, and the different things that I found, they very clearly look like balloons to me.
They do look like balloons.
Okay? And even in one of them, they had a slight yellow tint to them, and I just posted something in a room that, we're saying that some people said it was part of a tourism promotion for a centennial celebration of Madrid's Grand Via on Wednesday. And there's pictures I found of this celebration, and there's dozens of clusters of dozens of yellow balloons all tied to things like street lamps and stuff on this place where all these vendors were set. And it seems to me it would be quite easy for somebody just to cut the string and let them all go.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm leaning towards that myself because that's what they look like to me. whether that is what they turn out to be or not, my point is, if they are balloons, and it was balloons, a lot of people didn't recognize it. You know, and I made this determination just from looking at a picture, you know. You're right, Lily. Assumption is not a science. I'm not making an assumption. It's my determination that they were balloons. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. If I'm right, I'm right. But the point being is that if they are balloons, it went all over the internet. It went all over Facebook. You know, the news carried it. If it had been actual discs sitting in the sky, do you think you would have saw it on CNN?
Yeah. Okay.
You know, seriously.
I agree. I don't think you would have saw it on CNN. I don't think you would have. Most of the time, all I see that comes on CNN is stuff that I wouldn't consider to be real. Don't get me wrong, there are a few people like Stephen Bissett that get on there that talk, but still, you're not going to see them. I don't think, my problem lately is, David, is most of what I see that people write to me about and say, look at this UFO, and I'm looking and I'm going, I don't think so. I'm not seeing it. It's getting bad, and I don't know. You know, I do know we're coming out of the busiest months of the year for sightings. You know, everybody's outside right now. From July this way, everybody's been hanging outside their house. A lot of beautiful weather around the country. There's a lot going on. But just because you see a light moving in the sky or something off in the distance that doesn't look normal does not mean it's alien. Yeah, you can classify it as UFO, but you can't classify it as alien, and I think that's an important determination that we have to make. Because you can always hear people talking about UFOs. And I can't hate on them because UFO only means unidentified flying object, but I know
that's true. If it's a balloon and you can't tell it's a balloon, it is technically a UFO by the proper definition of UFO. I guess maybe what I'm trying to get at here is when people see something that is legitimately anomalous technology, not just something you can't identify. You know, I had a talk with James Carrion, traded a few emails with him when he was still head of MUFON, and I asked him straight up, why doesn't MUFON put together just a real simple kind of a UFO 101 thing to educate people on what they're seeing? You know, simple things like where's Jupiter and Venus in the sky? What do they look like at night or in the morning? You know, commercial airliners. What's the normal light pattern on a commercial airliner? That's information that people can either look up or they could look up and post to a website. But I've never seen anybody do that. Something that simple just to educate people so that you're not getting a whole lot of reports that aren't UFOs, that aren't possible technology.
Well, and I don't think you're going to, because it's not, you know, and I hate to say this, I was having this discussion with Linda earlier today about how come when you look at ufology today, the UFOs, abductions, whatever you have, usually the more crazy, outlandish stuff is what everybody seems to jump on and do. The really hardcore research never seems to get any real press. The people that are doing real research that have real UFOs, I mean, look at Ted Phillips. I mean, he's been around a long time. We both know he does good, hardcore UFO research. Mm-hmm. But look, how much press does he actually get? He doesn't, you know, and ladies and gentlemen, don't take this wrong, because I like Stanton Friedman too. But, you know, Stan's out there plugging away. This guy's got at least as valid, or if not more valid, information with this field, and he gets maybe 10% of the time that Stan does. Or for that matter, people like Linda Moulton Howe. I mean, we would be better served to have Ted Phillips on Coast to Coast doing a weekly or a monthly thing than we would Linda. And not to take anything away from him, I just think it would be more, you know, because he's more nuts and bolts and it's more scientific. It's a tough thing, man. I get really aggravated with it lately. You heard me last Wednesday. You know I'm fired up about it.
You know, Joe, I mentioned MUFON, and I'm not trying to bash on MUFON. I'm really not.
Yeah.
I think that they've established themselves for many, many years as the premier UFO investigation organization. Yep. If you've got a report, either send it to them or send it to Newfork. You know, those are the two places that I would recommend to people. But I guess maybe I'm throwing out a little challenge to MUFON. Why don't you create something that's easily accessible online or you know, just a, you know, whatever, something like that that's easily accessible to people, to train them to know what they're looking at. It's not that hard, but nobody seems to want to take that little step, because how much time, effort, manpower, and maybe even money are being wasted on blurry pictures of lights, birds, identifiable aircraft that are out of focus. This is not helping. And I think this thing in New York is an example of that.
Well,
and I hate to say it, but that case, if it turns out to be balloons, which I think it will be, that just feeds the skeptics when they say the average person is not a good observer. But I don't always agree with that. But you got to know what you're looking at first,
Well, I think, you see, and I've said this 100 times. We were having a discussion about some of the other UFO organizations a couple of weeks ago, and who is really qualified to really do UFO search. Somebody said, well, MUFON has a course. Yeah, they do. But really, they're not teaching you anything about aircraft mechanics or aircraft design or aircraft engineering or anything with electronics. They're not teaching you aircraft recognition, which should be the very first thing they teach. It's the first thing you learn. Anybody who does carry duty, whether you're a lonely guy on the ground or you work in electronics or whatever you do, the very first thing you learn is aircraft recognition. It's one of the reasons I like Navy witnesses, because it's one of the very first things they learn is aircraft recognition. And these are things that should be taught. It also allows you to, in the aircraft recognition charts, there's groups where in specific parts of the world, they'll say the sun shining on the Pacific Ocean at this time of day in this area gives an aurora like a glow of an orb, a large orb floating off the water when it's just a sheen. But they actually have several other things in there where you get these weird anomalies that you may think there's something else. They've even charted these for you. And they teach you about this stuff. And I think all UFO organizations, I think if you're going to really do real investigation work, as far as sighting investigation work, I think aircraft recognition should be a vital part of it. I think everyone should have at least a mid-range understanding of electronics, aircraft dynamics, and photography to really understand what you're looking at here. And I know a few of us out there that do it, because I know I do it, and I know quite a few other people that do, but those people aren't working in the UFOs like David. David's been doing sighting analysis. Well, at least I've been making him do it for 10 years.
Joe, you brought up something there, and that's, when's the last time you heard of a UFO group getting people together to teach them how to use their camera better, to teach them how to identify things like lens flare, dust particles that turn out to look like orbs, or any of the other, bunches of anomalies that can show up even on a digital camera? Does anybody give classes or instruction like that you know of?
Not. I hate to say this. In the old days when Walt was around, they used to do that, but they don't do that kind of stuff anymore.
They should go back to doing that. Everybody should.
I agree 100%. Even we should. Our car should really offer once every few months, sit down with somebody in an organization who's good with cameras and really explain to people how cameras work, because, I had to learn things the hard way over the last 28 years doing this. I made lots of mistakes. Matter of fact, one time I thought I had this weird meteor coming in on this weird angle, and what it was, when I had the film developed, there was something on the reel. So across like 3 photos, it left this weird streak with little blotches every so often on a tapered angle downward. Well, I thought I had something. So I went back and asked the guy over at Lakeside what this was. He said, it was an error on the developing wheel. So, hey, look, I thought I had something really good. But you got to learn these kind of things.
If you don't mind, I want to throw out a little shameless plug here for a magazine we picked up recently. It's out of the UK. It's called UFO Matrix. And I believe Philip Mantell is one of the editors and founders of the magazine. And there's a little couple-page article in there that's called 8 Techniques to Take Better Pictures and Videos of UFOs. And I'm thinking to myself, why have I never seen this in a UFO magazine before? It's great information.
Yeah, I don't ask if we can post it to the site. Ask me if you can post the article to the site.
There's another thing I wanted to bring up, and I kind of wish Angela was in the room with us. I'm talking about Angela Joyner, because she handled the Stephenville case. And in going back and looking at a few of the sightings like that over the last 10, 15 years, I noticed something, and I'm wondering if it's just, I don't know what you'd call it, I guess for lack of a better term, UFO fever. I noticed in areas where there's a few legitimate sightings, suddenly everybody and their brother comes out of the woodwork and says, I saw one too. How much of those reports are legitimate, and how much of it is, as I said, UFO fever?
Yeah.
I think that's another thing, that teaching people a little better about what you're seeing. Is it truly something anomalous, or is it an identifiable thing that you just may not be aware of? I think that would be a big asset.
It probably would be. Well, it's something that should be added to any organization who's doing sighting research. Unfortunately, we don't have no control over that, but we can bitch about it or complain about it. Sorry about that. We can complain about it. It's stuff like that. All you talking about stuff like that, we can add to our website. And we're a little bit different because most of the time, somewhere along the line, everybody's talking to everybody anyway, and it's easier to contact each other about camera stuff. But most of the stuff, like these days, most of the stuff I do is abduction research, even though I do keep, my cameras in the car. And guys, this is another reason I always say use analog versus digital. I love digital cameras. I think they're the greatest thing on the planet, but when it comes to evidence, they suck. It's too easy. Right now, guys, give you an example. I can take my little Droid phone, go outside, get this. I can take my little Droid phone, go outside, take a picture of the surrounding area, dial up the internet off my Droid phone, crop a UFO into the photo, and then download that photo to my computer just like it had been taken off of my phone. And then wait for y'all, if you ever tell a difference, that I get it. So that's why I prefer analog over digital. Because on analog, you got real film. It's harder to fake real film. You got to use models and shit to fake real film. And that's more easily detectable. On digital, it's not. It's one of the things some of y'all should think about. I still keep my high 8 Sony camera. I got another one, but that's the one I like. If I'm going to go out UFO hunting, that's the one I'm taking with me.
There's something, and I'm not bashing iCar here, Joe, but there's something that when people would come in the room a lot of times and say, well, what can I do about this? What do I do about that? And the other thing. And I haven't heard anybody recommend for quite some time, and maybe that's, our fault, that, those little disposable cameras you can buy at Walgreens or whatever for $5, $6, $7. Just keep one of those in your car just because.
You're right. Actually, I haven't heard anybody say it in a while either. I plugged them on a show a couple of weeks back because I keep, like David said, I actually keep 2 of those. Actually, guys, I have 2 35mm cameras that are starboard in the bag. I have one that's encased in plastic that you can take pictures underwater with. All right? Yeah, I just got it in case we ever run across the USO somewhere and I got time to stick my hand under the water. You never know. You never know. I live on the Gulf Coast, guys. You never know. So I actually have those. And I agree. This is the way we do it. This is my preferred thing. I have, I usually buy the starboard 35mm. They got Kodak, 400 Gold series or something you can buy. They're like $10 or $8 a camera. They're high speed. They're great. You can use them. Like I said, I got the one that's covered in plastic. I have my Canon, my new Canon's a 7 megapixel. I have that, so I have that with me. And then I have my Sony High 8 with me as well. So I'm using this for all 3 for taking pictures. So when I get something, it's really good, that way. It works really well. It's a nice way of doing things, and one camera complements the other camera. So you get it on the 35mm. I actually thought about buying me a nice 35mm camera, maybe a Nikon or a Canon or something. But the little 35mm starboards work good, so I can take it with that. I can take it with the high 8, and then I can take it with the digital, and I can come back and see what exactly I got. As long as you got some time. Sometimes you don't. So, but usually there's more than one of us when we're traveling. So we can have more than one camera going at one time.
Joe, I know iCar doesn't normally investigate lots of UFO sightings, but the reason I mentioned those disposable cameras and also trying to train people towards what they're looking at, there's tons and tons of those pictures out there that are just blurry objects, and they're probably identifiable in 99% of the time. But the thing is, if that one person out there just happened to be able to get a very clear picture of a disc, and it's on one of those disposable cameras, that film can't really be messed with, as far as I know, because you have to turn the whole camera back in to have it developed.
Yeah, you do.
And that'd be some nice proof there, of something that's not normal.
But, you know, in the old days, MUFON used to tell you that you had to have a non-tamper-proof camera. Matter of fact, they used to supply them with seals on them. I don't know if they even still do that anymore, but in the old days, they used to actually supply cameras with seals on them. Here's a perfect case and example, Ed Walters. Some of the cameras used in the Ed Walters case were provided by MUFON, sealed cameras by MUFON, so that they could prove the film hadn't been tampered with. I don't even see them do that. This is the difference between good leadership in an organization and poor leadership in an organization. And really, you know, I've talked to David's wife about this, DeAndrew, more than once about maybe opening a sightings division in ICAR. Because really and truly, ever since Larry Hatch closed up shop, I don't really feel that the UFOs themselves are being given a fair shake. I don't think the investigations, with the exception of maybe 2 people, maybe 3 out there, are really doing good investigation work on UFOs. So I don't think you're missing. Like, I'm still not convinced that Stephen Phil was alien. I haven't seen enough to convince me about that yet. So somebody out there is not doing their homework, or doing their work, I should say.
Well, you know, there's another thing too. Is you know, I know you've gotten some video of an object that was probably had something to do with one of the bases there, either in the NASA Stennis facility or over there in Pensacola area. You know, there are military aircraft that have been misidentified as something else, and that's another part of this identification thing. What are you seeing? What are you not seeing? You know, I think people near military bases, if they're into the UFO topic, they ought to make themselves familiar with what does fly in and out of that base.
Well, you know how I am, because we have lots of military bases around where we do research. See, but like David said earlier, even if you're just a novice and you're not even really thinking about this field, but just maybe way on the outskirts, what does it hurt to spend $8 on a camera and put it in your glove box? Come on, guys. What does it hurt? Throw it in your purse. Throw it in your little knapsack thing. Whatever. Just throw it. You know, y'all guys that wear those manly purses, put it in there. Just carry the damn camera. You know, every night I go walk 3 miles and I'm getting myself back in good shape again. So, but still, even then, I bring my phone with me because it's got a built-in camcorder and a built-in camera. Actually, it's got an 8-megapixel camera built into it. Kind of nice, actually. And so I bring it with me, just in case. Because the other night, a couple nights ago, I was out at sunset, and I seen something hovering along the lake going into the sunset, so I snapped a couple pictures. But when I got it home and blew it up on my computer, it turned out to be a medevac in a helicopter. They just got kind of one of those low-profile shapes to them. But hey, I got it, you know, and right there I got the rule of that. And this is, I don't know how many states have this right now. I know only a handful, I think a dozen. Airport Monitor 2 allows you to track any movement in airspace around your area for 80 miles up to 1 year. You can track it live, and you can go back up to 1 year and see what was flying. So between them and JTRAC, you can rule out aircraft and satellites in about 10 minutes.
Yeah, the JTRAC program I have on my computer, that's a good program.
Yeah, anybody who's going to do what we're talking about should have JTRAC on their program, and you should check your area. I know Los Angeles has Airport Monitor, New Orleans has Airport Monitor, I think Boston does. There's a few other airports out there that have it. Check it, and some airports offer their own thing. So check and see if your airport offers one of these programs, because it really does help. And classified flights, they don't say classified, they just have like FL number and that's it. They don't tell you anything. They don't give you destination or anything like that. But you can track these things, where they're going, where they're coming from, what type of aircraft they are, what altitude they're flying at. It's a great program. Also, it allows you, if you've seen, this is what's even really nice about this program. Linda and I were out in the swamp one night, and there was all kind of movement going on. And we knew for sure one of these things was an aircraft, but we couldn't tell. So when we got home and checked the Airport Monitor, we found out that the incoming flights that we could see coming in were flying at about 35,000 feet. We found the outbound flights leaving out of New Orleans and Lake International were flying at about 15,000 feet. So we knew what this was. These things, whatever we've seen, were actually flying about 4,000 or 5,000 feet. It made it easy for us to realize what it was, and also made it realize that it was not anything conventional. It was something flying over the NASA Stennis facility. We even knew right where it was at. So we ruled out the airplanes, we ruled out J-track, we got its altitude down. We never could tell you exactly what it was, but we knew it was there. And we got that on videotape, but all you can see is white lights moving all over the place. It makes it kind of complicated, but you can tell by the stacking where everything is at. It was a very weird night, too, by the way.
You know, Joe, there's something else I want to share with people. I think I've told a few people in the room about this, and Dee might have mentioned it on her show. And I know I posted it on a forum website because I had someone post something, say, hey, I saw this thing over California the other day, and this is what it looked like. And immediately the light bulb went off over my head because we had a sighting here. Someone said they saw two white lights, and in between the two lights, there was light pulsing back and forth. And that's all they could see from a distance, and they didn't know what it was, so that truly was a UFO as far as the definition of UFO. But a few weeks later, I had a friend that I worked with tell me that they saw the same thing, and they thought that they were seeing something really unique, and they were going to take a picture of it. Well, the thing flew right over their heads, and what it ended up being was a small airplane with one of those scrolling lit-up banners underneath the wing, so that you almost had to be directly underneath it to see the message. But from the side, it looked like a pulsing light. And this person that was writing on the forum described the same exact thing, and I told them about this, and they still didn't want to believe me. Now, I'm not saying that is what they saw. I was just trying to offer an explanation.
Yeah.
Now, there are so many websites that post UFO reports, but again, back to the, helping people figure out what they're seeing, if it is explainable. I've never seen anybody put that explanation for any sightings up, or any number of things that can be identified. How many times have you ever heard a report of somebody saying, I saw these bright white lights, and they just seemed like they were sitting there, and you come to find out that that person was underneath approach traffic to an airport, and they're seeing the headlights on the airplane for, but they're not sure that's what they're looking at because no one's ever instructed them on that.
Yeah, and that's a good point. They don't know what they're looking at. Well, it's like Venus. Come on, how many people report Venus as UFOs? I know they argue back and forth between a quarter and half of UFO reporting turn out to be Venus. That's just sad. I don't even know how else to say it. I mean, that's just sad. Even if you're not, everybody should at least, and that's another thing, if you're going to do ufology, you should at least have basic astronomy underneath your belt. I don't think most people realize if you're going to get in this field what is required. You really got to have a good working avionics background. You really got to know about avionics. You got to have some understanding of it. The more, the better. You really need to know about astronomy. You really, really need to know aircraft recognition. You really need to know about cameras and films and video cameras. You even need to know about the software and programs that you use when you're analyzing this film. There's a lot more involved in this than most people realize. This isn't for somebody who's not good with electronics or computers. Really, it's not going to benefit you to do this. In the old days, you could do it with 35mm camera and some development in your room, but you still couldn't do the analysis you can do with computer software that we have these days. Even paint, I just upgraded my paint shop to Paint Shop 10 Pro. It's excellent. I mean, there's all kind of features in there that allow you to distinguish. It gives you grayscale pixelation, so you know if somebody's cropped something into it, you can tell it different. I mean, there's just so many different ways to look at this stuff with this. And sometimes you'll be shifting between all the filters, and you'll notice something as you're shifting. And you're like, oh, wait a minute, what's this? And you can tell that the photo's been cropped. Most of the time, you can catch stuff like that with just simple, basic, well, they're not simple programs, but still, they're really good to use. And there's a lot of useful stuff out there, but you got to really have a grasp of how all this works if you're going to get involved with it. And don't get frustrated because you make wrong decisions or wrong determinations. There's nobody I know that works in this field that hasn't made a mistake. No one. The only difference between us and a lot of people, we'll admit when we make a mistake. It's just a lot of them won't. A lot of them will just stay on the same thing with a dogmatic path and never let go of the phone, which is a shame for the field because it portrays. Well, I'll use an example. There's somebody who's been working these probe ships. David and I talked about these probe ships like 5 years ago. It was before Katrina, so it might have been 6 years ago. We see these pictures of these probe ships hit the internet. We're going back and forth. It took all of 3 days, not even that, 2 days to find out they were hoaxed. I think it took 3 days to find out the guy who actually hoaxed them in the UK who was making this for whatever that film was over there. But still, 6 years later, I'm hearing certain famous UFO people say that these are real legitimate probe ships. Now, they've been thoroughly debunked. There's no real argument against the debunking of them, but still, we hear it. So people get confused. They'll come here like what we're talking about tonight, and they're going, well, I heard Joe and David talking about these probe ships being fake and why they were fake, and then they'll go listen to another program, and they'll hear this other ufologist go, no, they're real, and blah, 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 and they're not. But, say la vie, it goes on. It's really irritating sometimes.
Hey, Joe, can I bring this up? Cartoonist, our friend Dennis Reno just brought up a question in the room.
Hey, Dennis.
Don't you think that ufologists are more skeptical than skeptics? And Carmen, that's the great answer. Jason just put in an answer right after that. Good ufologists are, and that's true.
Yeah,
they are.
True.
But like what Joe and I are talking about here is, it seems like a lot of times, having the next great, exciting story takes precedence over actually having a good investigation done on it. The truth takes a back seat to, here, look at this. And
well, go ahead.
But no, I just think ufology in general is hurting itself by not addressing that.
Well, they are, and what bothers me most about ufologists is I know personally from being in this field now that there are some really, really good people out there, very versed on a lot of topics.
Oh, yes, there are, of course.
But they're not getting the lecture time or the press time they should. Look, Dee, close your ears for a minute. I don't want you to get a swole head on me. When it comes to Roswell, y'all know I give Dee Andrew a hard time about Roswell all the time because it's just what I like to do. But I really think she's better versed than even Stanton Friedman. Matter of fact, I invited her and Stanton on a show one night, and she trounced his ass. Okay, and I like Stanton. I've been interviewed him like 17 times, but she did. She actually knew more over the overall case than he did. But you don't see her speaking at any of the conferences. You don't hear her on Coast to Coast. And she really has a better knowledge of it. But it's not just that. Just like when I was bringing up Ted Phillips earlier in the show, there are just some really, really good people out there that are not getting the attention they should. And when it comes to abduction research, you hear ICAR's work, it has completely engulfed the field now. You hear our terminology, our ideas, our designs, the whole 9 yards. It's saturated ufology. I get letters every day about thank y'all for opening up the field. But do you see any of ICAR's members or even any of their contactees speaking anywhere? Oh, hell no, you don't. We like to play because we bring too much. See, we're not crazy enough, David. We're just not crazy enough, man.
That's my point, Joe. I mean, as ufology quietly realized in the back of its collective mind that they can't really accomplish much else, and so they just gave up for entertainment value or what? I think there's still areas that can be researched. You mentioned Ted Phillips.
Yeah.
Just overall across the board, do you want to get to some answers here, or are we just a new branch of entertainment?
Well, I hate to say it, but in a lot of ways, I do think it's just a new branch of entertainment. Judging from, I've been to now about 24 conferences, maybe 3. I know people have been more than I. I've talked to a lot of people about the different conferences, which a lot of them are going to the wayside now, but still. When you see the conferences with basically the same lineup every year, and you see that there's 5 or 6 key speakers that speak all the time now, I don't want to take away from these speakers because most of these speakers are damn good speakers, so I really don't want to take away from them because I do think they're helping the field. But by saying that, something I learned early on is people don't want to hear. In other words, if you travel in conference circuits, you don't want to hear the same person. You want to see new people, new ideas, new thoughts, new design. Or if it's the same person, you want to see steadily new research. And it's one of the things David brought up earlier. I'll use this guy's name if I don't mind, Dr. Richard Boylan. He started out doing research at a low-key area. Now he's way up. He's a Fruit Loop. It's the only way I can say it politely. And if you heard me, I mean it, Doc. So if you want to get into a debate, you just give me a call. But the thing about it is, he is. He went from way down here to way up here. And the reason why is it's progression. He started out doing research here, and everybody was like, yeah, that's okay. And then, he wasn't getting enough attention, so he had to go to the next exciting thing. And then that didn't work. Then he went to Star Child School, which got a lot of attention, and that faded out, and now he's on to the next crazy thing. And that is ufology today. That is ufology today, and it's a poor excuse for a field. And I said this the other night, there is no leadership, none. And the problem being is I don't know how there can be. I'm not going to follow Cliff Clifford. I think he's a nice guy, but I don't think he knows what he's doing. There may only be 3 people in the field that I would even myself follow behind, and I don't think they would do it.
Let me say this again before we round up here on the UFO stuff. I've mentioned MUFON a few times, and I'm not bashing MUFON. Please, I hope no one takes it like that. I still think they're the premier UFO investigation group. I think they need to step up, though, and the leadership change I don't think helped. Dee has had quite a few MUFON people on her show because she tries to be supportive of them, and almost every single one of them that she's had on her show, they're good people. They're good investigators. They got good level-headed, they have the, I'll look at this from a skeptical point of view first kind of, mentality about them, and that's the kind of researchers they need. And they've got a lot of them, but I don't really hear their voices being presented as MUFON, opinion or whatever.
Because they're not crazy, David. That's the whole point. They're not crazy. You ever notice the people that do get to speak for MUFON? They're lunatics. It's almost, if I didn't know better, and if I didn't know better, I would think there was someone out there directing it saying, okay, this is a good investigator, that, but we're not going to let none of them speak. We're going to let this other crazy Texas guy get up and speak all over the place because he's a nutcase Fruit Loop. I don't understand it. I have a fit if one of our directors, I'm already kind of hacked off at one right now. If one of our directors went off and did something like that, they would instantly fire. I'd be like, you're fired. Get out of here. Just go home. It's over with. I don't understand why. Maybe it's what people want today, but I don't know. There's got to be a reason why it's happening. Other than organizations being infiltrated, there's got to be a reason why it happened. And so we either...
Joe, you mentioned, what was his name? Larry Hatch used to have that sighting map and everything. And I think that was great because that identified where are the hot spots in the country. And, if you see that there's a military base or something of interest to them, then that became obvious. I don't understand why that information is still not there. Maybe not on his part, but why didn't somebody else pick up the gauntlet and run with it?
Yeah, and nobody did. A few of them did. I think a couple of things did pick up off his site, but he did an enormous amount of work. I wish the guy, if he would, I would buy the programming software. He's got every sighting in his database from like 1940 until 2000, because I think it's when he retired his site. And what was cool? I was over there playing around one day. As a matter of fact, I was in the Yahoo room, in the Pal Talk room in its early days. And I was talking with Jason and November Hansen, and I just got to click it, and it did. It did 1940, then it did 41. It started overlaying 42, 43, 44, 45. And I noticed, like the UFOs blossoming and sprouting out. So while I was talking, I started looking around to see what we had at the time, abduction-wise, and I started noticing where there was clusters of UFOs, there was clusters of abductions. And it was the first time in the history that I know that we could correlate alien abductions with UFO sightings. Because he's the only one that did the map. Because I love what Peter Davenport does, but he hasn't got an overlay map like that, where you can just click and see what's in the area. And I liked it that you could click on the actual sighting, and he actually had the information for the sighting, in what area, what time, what place. It was an enormous amount of work. I hated to see it go. It was the best database there was at the time. And it's a shame. It's a shame that we don't know somebody could develop the software for it, because I'm sure we could get George Filer and Peter Davenport's site as we keep Davenport linked from the ICAR site as it is.
Yeah, that's true. I guess I've ranted all I want to rant on UFOs. The bottom line here for me is I don't want to come to the conclusion that ufology cannot accomplish anything else. I think they've gone as far as they can on a lot of areas, but there are still other things that can be done. But I'm not seeing anybody taking those directions to fill those voids. And I really wish they would.
Well, part of the problem is we really should have, in the early days, added a sighting division sidecar. We really should have. That was a mistake on my part, and the founders, because I'm not going to take all the blame here, but and it is something that we really, really seriously need to look into adding. But for some reason, not just MUFON, there's a couple other organizations out there that track sightings. There seems to be some internal conflict in which way the organization is going to go. In case y'all didn't know, the very first time I met James Kellyan was at the Las Vegas conference. We had a big MUFON gathering up there, and James had been director for like a week, I think. I ripped him. I had about 4 White Russians in me. I ripped him a new one like y'all wouldn't believe. And because I was still hacked off at John Slushler for the bullshit he said, on Wake Up USA on 2 occasions. And so I just tore him up. And he told me he's going to do this, this, and this. And I didn't like the guy because, he's ex-whatever he was. And so I was like, well, another somebody infiltrating MUFON, blah, 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 blah. Then I heard him, I had done a thing in Roswell, the 60th anniversary. And the following year, he was there doing the MUFON thing. And I heard him actually come out kind of hard on Roswell. And I was kind of impressed that he had the, what to do it. Then I heard he came out on Stan Romanek case and a couple of cases after that. Whether I agreed or disagreed with what he was doing, I did agree with the fact that he was taking a new stance and a much more hardcore stance on what was going on inside his organization. Well, you see what happened to him. They canned his butt, okay? Because, frankly, that's not what the majority of the directors at MUFON want. The problem for them is half their organization is what I like to call PL and Lers, and it's not what they want to get into. They really want to get more into the New Age and paranormal areas of this, and for a UFO investigation organization, I just think it's a bad idea. It's not that there's not paranormal associated. Okay, let me rephrase that, because I don't know what the hell paranormal is, okay? I really don't. So let me rephrase this before I get me and David in trouble here. There are events that happen to contactees and abductees that are outside the normal UFO stuff, okay? I don't know what that is. I can't tell you if it's demonic or angels or... Somebody, a contactee suggested to me this about 15 years ago, and he was probably right. He thinks, because of the high vibration and the dimensional shifting going on with the aliens, sometimes we get dimensional bleed-through. He said he thinks there's a lot of times that's what ghost stars, dimensional bleed-through, and other things that we see are simply phases we're catching between dimensions as the activity around us is going on, because it seems to stop once the activity is over with, or once the event is over with. So he's probably right. It probably is what it is. It probably is some type of dimensional shifting. I can't say that's what all paranormal is because I have not a clue. But in these cases, it's a damn good hypothesis for what's going on. But there's no proof for it.
Joe, I'm glad you brought this up because this is actually one of the things I wanted to touch on it, and I think I mentioned that to you earlier in an IM. And just the short version of what definition of what paranormal is anything outside of the norm that cannot be identified by standard scientific investigation or technique. Now, by that terminology, yeah, maybe UFOs are paranormal by that definition, but we can offer a theory as to what they are. They're vehicles, either from another planet or, as you pointed out, possibly another dimension. But there again, it's just a theory. But just to say it's paranormal under a blanket term, I don't know if I really agree with that, because if you hear the term paranormal as far as like UFOs and abductions go, what's the first thing you think? Ghosts, spirits, that sort of thing? Are they really in the same category?
Then I agree that when I hear paranormal, I'm like most people. I think of ghosties and vampires and things along those. I don't think about extraterrestrials. Maybe that's a bad way of thinking, but it is the norm. So I'm thinking they don't have the two. I just have an issue with these two events being tied together. I just don't think we should be tying ghost research into alien research. I think we're asking for trouble, and we're asking just to hurt the field in ways that I don't think most of us can even imagine. I really do, but that's my own personal opinion.
Joe, can I give you an example here? Something somebody asked me on a forum I like to post on every once in a while. they were talking about the reports you've heard of an ET coming through the wall, or taking the abductee through a closed window or out a wall. And they said, as far as we know, ghosts can do that too, so aren't they related? And I pointed out to them, well, that could be something to do with their physiology. They could be from another dimension, and they know how to shift in and out of this reality. I don't know. But they could also be using some sort of technology that we're not aware of yet. Maybe they understand something about particle physics that we don't, and they're actually using technology to alter the walls or the windows' molecular makeup. It could be something that could be scientifically explainable if we had the science to understand it. Just to automatically lump it in with, it's similar to ghosts because both can go through a wall, supposedly.
But by the same aspect, couldn't you say that just because you're thinking it's a ghost going through a wall, could just been a grave disguising itself, letting your mind think he was a ghost? And people, you got to be real careful with that kind of stuff. They can come back to get you.
That is true too, Joe. But did you understand what I was trying to say?
Yeah,
the person who had posted that stopped and thought about it. I said, that's a good point. I never thought about possibly they're using some sort of technology we just don't understand yet to actually alter the wall or the window or whatever. Or maybe even altering the abductee's physiology so that they can pass through the solid object. It doesn't necessarily mean it's on the same level as whatever ghosts or spirits are. In that generalization of paranormal, they may not be the same thing because of this reason.
Well, maybe that's how the Greys learned to do it. Started watching the ghosties way back in the day. It's hard to say because we don't know what ghosts are. That's what the problem is. As far as we know, there's something from another world that's zipping between dimensions that we catch every once in a while. That always worries me a little bit. I got issues with dead people walking all over. I just got issues, y'all. I'm sorry. Leave it alone.
Again, Dennis Reno posted something in the room here. It said Ted Phillips in the September MUFON Journal wrote, "It's time to quit ignoring the paranormal aspects connected to many UFO cases." And I don't necessarily disagree with that, Dennis, but, is there a clear definition of what paranormal is? Are people starting to lump all of this together as though in some way it's associated? I personally, I don't think it should be.
Well, actually, though, I think the reason Ted wrote that was because Cliff Clifford announced on my show that one of the very first things MUFON was going to do this year is try to start researching paranormal. And the only reason they're doing this is because right now paranormal is big and popular and a moneymaker. It has nothing to do with research. This is about, what's popular in the scene right now. And paranormal is way more popular than ufology is. It's a fact. It's an unfortunate fact, but it is a fact. And I hate to say this on the air, but ufology has a lot of game playing that goes on. Anybody who's been in the field for more than 5 or 6 years at the level we are understands that there's a lot of games going on. Sometimes you got to give a little to get a little. Sometimes you got to put up with stuff you would not normally deal with. Because I said this Wednesday night. When I used to host Wake Up USA, I was a much harsher, much stricter host than I am on UFO Undercover. I let stuff slide on UFO Undercover that I would not have let slide on Wake Up USA. I'd have been like, what did you just say? Have you lost? Get off my show. You don't even belong here. Go home. Or I'd turn the virtual audio on, which was even worse for them. But, there is politics involved. And it sucks. But there is. We don't have control of what goes on in the field. We're part of the field. There's only a handful of people that really have any control. And some of them people really do have ufology's interest at heart, and some of them only have their interest at heart. And as long as it stays like that, the field's never going to change. It's going to be, well, most of the time when you see stuff on TV, especially when it deals with alien abductions, how often do you feel like they're portraying a legitimate, a stable, legitimate, normal contactee? I don't know what you'd say normal contactee, but a lot of the contactees I know are very stable, have good lives, good careers, good families. They're not a bunch of Fruit Loop nutcases, and I hate that they're portrayed that way. But I notice most of the TV series I see, somewhere along the line, they have them say something that makes them sound like a Fruit Loop. And, of course, when mainstream watches that, they're like, well, that can't be real. Come on. Because people can conceive the concept that this planet's being visited. They can even understand the concept of why someone might want to abduct us for the same reason we abduct animals. So the human race doesn't really have a problem per se with that. It's the rest of the stuff that's being said. That's what they tend to have a problem with. And there's a lot of that.
You know, I don't have a problem across the board with people saying that some of the abduction phenomena may have, similarities to paranormal. But I really think there needs to be a definition of what those things are put out there, not just a blanket term that we've got to stop ignoring the paranormal aspects. Well, what aspects? What aspects are paranormal in people's minds, and how does that compare to other things that people term as paranormal? Are they the same? Are they similar? Can they be put in that same basket?
And see, that's a good point. I mean, what are we going to decide as paranormal? Are we going to do UFO and ghost research? Is that what we're talking about here? Or are we talking about poltergeist research? Are we just talking about weird things that go inside the house when a contact is going on, like things levitating around the house? That's not paranormal. That's part of abduction. Sometimes they get the ship too close, shit starts floating around your house. Not just that, other things go weird in your house, electrical problems, water problems, all kind of weird issues that can come up. You can be walking by your TV, turning on and off. See, I don't consider that to be paranormal. I consider that to be normal for an abduction or a contactee. To me, that's normal. That's why I don't consider contactee research to be paranormal, because we know enough about it that we know there are some norms involved with the research. So it's one of those things. I'm with you, David. I don't know. If we're going to start saying, we're going to put paranormal into ufology, then we need some definitions on what paranormal
here, Joe, New York Lily just posted something in the room that said telepathy is paranormal. And by the definition of paranormal, she's right, because it's something that doesn't normally occur in the context of this culture. But I'd also throw out the argument there that is it maybe just an aspect of the functioning of the mind, the brain, that we just don't have the science to identify yet? So is it truly out of the norm, or is it just something we don't have the ability to fully research yet?
But you see, what is actually out of the norm? 6,000 plus years of abduction is norm. For those families and generations that this has been going on for, this is normal. This isn't out of the norm. For a family generational contactee, this is normal. This is something that's going to go on. So it's not really paranormal. That's why I get aggravated with these terms, because technically, anything that's been going on as long as this has been, with as many people that is involved in this, you can't really. It's a normal aspect for this percentage of whatever percentage of this is of the population. It's a normal aspect. Because we're going to start using terms like that, then you can start saying certain diseases that only 1% of the population get are paranormal because they're out of the norm. When in fact that we know they're not. We know what they are. So you see, that's why I said you got to be real careful with definitions here, because there's too much ladder from either direction on the term paranormal. Anything out of the norm. Well, first off, we got to define norm. My norm is not the same as David's norm. David's norm is not the same as Goddess's norm. Goddess's norm is not the same as Jason's norm is. So how do you define paranormal? You can't even define normal. See my point?
Very true. And Joe, I noticed by that time we're needing to take a break here, so if y'all stick around, please. We'll be back in about 8 to 10 minutes. You're listening to Eye to Sky, UFO Synopsis, and I'm guest hosting tonight. My name is David Andrew. My guest tonight is Joe Montaldo, International Director for International Community for Alien Research, and we'll see you again in just a few minutes.
Welcome to Eye to the Sky, the UFO Synopsis. Now here's your host, D. Andrew.
Welcome back, everyone, to the second half of Eye to the Sky, the UFO Synopsis. Tonight I'm guest hosting. My name is David Andrew. My guest tonight is Joe Montaldo, International Director for the International Community for Alien Research. And I think this last hour of the show we're going to start addressing some abduction-related things. Joe, something had come up a while back, a few weeks ago, and I'd asked you a question, I think, during your show about abduction criteria. And I'd like to reiterate and expand on that a little bit if we can, but I'll wait first. I made somebody a promise, I'm sorry. I have a question for you. This is from Alien Techno, and he wanted to know, he wanted to know what percentage of mainstream ufologists have had any contact experiences.
You know, when we were talking about that at the break, I was thinking, damn. Okay, this is a tough one. In the abduction field, probably about half. UFO field, it's hard to say because, see, I got this thing about UFOs. I really don't think, unless it's a mass sighting, that the average person sees UFOs. I really don't, because most UFOs, they're usually reported it's like a glimpse or they're popping, coming. A lot of times it's from contactees that don't know they're contactees or abductees yet. You'd be surprised how many people reported a sighting to me that later on turned out to be a contactee or an abductee. Even in Mexico City, when they had that mass sighting and over 1 million people saw it, a lot of those people, at least a lot that we talked about, turned out to be contactees. So it's hard to say. In the field, I want to say it's about 50%, but I think if you higher, it could be lower. I don't think Stanton Friedman's an abductee, but he's never seen a UFO. And 2 people who work in the field that have never seen one, they're probably not contactees. The ones that have, though, I'm thinking, let me phrase this correctly. The ones that have that are real researchers probably are contactees. So, yeah, I'm going to say 50% and hope I'm even close. Like I said, it could be way higher, it could be way lower, but I think for people like David and myself, and I hate to speak for him, but a few others, it's a calling almost for us. We have to be involved in this for some reason, shape, or form. And I think they put particular groups together because certain members offset other certain members, and I think it keeps the truth in the overall project, whatever their project is, moving in a safe direction, I guess is the easiest way to say it. Because I've noticed once groups of contactees start forming together like ours did a decade ago, stuff happens. None of us, none of the people who are members of ICO, none of the main directors or anything like that, the founding directors, would tell you that any of us thought we would be doing what we're doing right now, or have the amount of control or power we do in the field right now. None of us would have told you that. I remember the old days when I was just happy to even get to talk to someone like Stanton Friedman. I got giddy like a schoolgirl when we got to talk to him the first time. And I still remember that. It was a big thrill for me. And so, hey, it's how it is. But really, I'm thinking 50%. Because I don't know, like Richard Dolan, I don't think he's ever had a sighting. So he's probably not a contactee, but he could be. There's no way. We know, actually, I don't think anybody who hasn't had a sighting has a contactee. I just don't. I really think when it comes to the UFOs, I think a lot of times they're just seeing them, as they're coming and going. As far as I want to pop that question up about seeing all those wars in space with those night binoculars, I'm sorry, guys, I'm not buying it. I'm just not. I'm sorry. With all the telescopes and stuff looking up in the sky every night, I'm just not buying it. I'm having issues. Send me some video or something, but something convincing. I've looked through lots of night shot things at night, and I've seen some weird stuff in the sky, but I can't say I've seen any UFO battles or anything like that. So, and if I ever do, I'm going to freak. Y'all going to know it right off the bat. I'm going to be on the air ranting and raving. Oh my God, they're coming to kill us all. I can see it now.
Joe, I had another UFO-related question here sent to me, and I'd like to address this real quick, but I do want to move on to abduction-related topic here. The question is for both of us, is what do you think of the press conference that Hastings and Robert Salas presented in Washington?
This question gets me in trouble on a regular basis because, one, I think it was a really good deal the way they did it, and I think it got a lot of good press. But do I think it was a waste of money? Yes. Do I think it's going to make any difference? No. So why did they actually do this? Yeah, I've been having an issue with certain ufologists lately because they do stuff that sounds good, like exopolitics, but nothing's going to come out of it, okay? We know there's not going to be disclosure. The government doesn't want to disclose. There's no need for the government to disclose. There's just no need for it. So to keep pushing an issue that that Stephen Greer started in 2001, and here we are in 2010. We've petitioned Congress. We've had generals out. We've done everything possible, including even get one of Obama's staffers even talking about this pilot before Obama got in, and still there's no disclosure. Okay? And I got to tell you this, too, it's not going to matter. Because like with France releasing its documents, I say this every time somebody releases documents, it's not going to change anything because it's not. Until one of the United States presidents stands in front of the UN Assembly and says, yes, this planet is being visited by extraterrestrials, and they are here for this, and this reason, it's not going to make a difference. And even then, half the planet's still going to say, it's a load of crap, they're trying to trick us, they're trying to panic us so that the right hand can do what the left hand wants to do, or the right hand won't see what the left hand wants to do. So even then it's going to be hard. The only real way there will ever be disclosure on planet Earth, and this is going back to what we were just talking about, is if E.T. lands on the White House lawn and do in the middle of a press conference. That's it. Other than that, or they land over a bunch of cities. Shorter than that, you don't have disclosure. Even the president at this point isn't going to be enough for disclosure. So knowing this, and the average person who understands politics and understands why we keep things secret would know this. So why bother with a press conference that frankly isn't going to make any difference? And the subject matter itself, shutting down nuclear facilities, is a great one, but it's 50 years old. If you don't know about it, shame on you if you're in the field. And I just don't see where it's changed anything, done anything, except for maybe get them personally some press and some limelight.
Joe, can I jump on the other side of that?
Yeah,
I don't necessarily disagree with you. Is it going to matter? Is it going to make a difference? I honestly don't know. I think it's good that you got at least some coverage to point out to the general American public that there is an aspect to ufology that should concern everyone, and that is them being able to shut down our nukes. That's a very serious thing. But, as you said, it's taken all this time to get around to letting people know about this. And I understand the fact that they're ex-military coming forward to say this, so that they have to watch their P's and Q's until retirement, because they could jeopardize that. I'll give them that. That's fine. But, it took 60 years to get, 50 years to get some of this information out. Whether it's going to matter, I don't know.
Well, and I'll tell you this, too. Doing the thing, I voice stressed everybody on the thing. I actually sat down, took the voice stress software, and went through all of it. I can tell you this, half of them passed it. But the facial recognition software kicked 3 of them right off the bat. And then when it was ran through the stress, they failed it. So they failed voice stress and facial recognition. So that's an issue right off the bat.
It is. Joe, you, in all fairness, you've got to at least give them a little bit of, these are military guys who may or may not have said something about this in public before. They could be just scared, let's...
I'm happy for anybody who's willing. I'm happy for anybody who's willing to come forward. I really am. And it's nothing to do with the guys. I personally, anybody who's willing to get up in front of a camera and talk about one of their reports or their things, I think is brave. And I think it takes a lot of you-know-whats to do it. So I don't fault them. My only issue with this whole thing was the motives behind it, not the deal itself, because I think it's good for people to see it, like David was saying. It's good press, for the layman to see these kind of things. It might get them involved in the field. But in reality, as a ufologist, not as just the everyday person, I know it's a complete and utter waste of time. So I have to think, for the guys doing it, what was their motives behind it? Was it to educate the laymen? I don't think that's what it was. Was it try to stir Congress? Well, that would be an utterly waste of time, especially since we're in the middle of getting ready to change Congress. It would have been a waste of time because comes November, we're going to have a new Congress in one shape, form, or fashion. So I have to question the motives behind it, not the actual presentation, but the actual motives behind it. That's what I would actually have to question here. Why did they actually do it? And next time I see one of the two of them, because they're both nice guys, I'll ask them, what were your motives behind it? And they'll answer me. So it's one of the nice things with knowing some of these people in the field, you can ask and say, hey, what did you thought? I'll ask Robert South next time he's on the show. I say, what do you think was going to come out of this? What were you hoping to achieve from this? That way I'll know whether his goals were, realistic or if he was just trying to make a name for himself. Because I find more and more in the field that's what's going on. It's not about the truth. It's about how can I excel myself to the top of the field. I thought about this one time. A friend of mine wrote to me about some of the abduction stuff we talked about. And he asked me, he said, I don't know why you don't take like 10 or 15 of your most outlandish abduction counts and make them public. He said it would put the organization so high up and so many people would know your name that it would be ridiculous. And I said, yeah. But then all the rest of the world would think we were complete utter morons for believing these people.
Yeah.
So you're damned if you do, you're damned if you die. You want to keep credibility, you're not going to get as much popularity. It just goes hand in hand, unfortunately. And that has more to do with the people listening than it does with the ufologists themselves. It's what you want to hear. Or shows like the one that me and David were talking at the break wouldn't have such a high rating. So that kind of stuff really aggravates me, by the way. But go ahead, man. I'll shut up.
Well, Joe, this is why I wanted to expand upon that question I'd asked you the other night about abduction criteria. Why is it important to establish abduction criteria and correct it? And some people responded to the show we're talking about with these questions of well, who are you to say that person didn't have a legitimate experience? And even your wife brought up to me a point that we know so much about the abduction phenomena is based on a person's perception, how they perceive this totally unreal, this amazing thing that's happening to them. How do they perceive it? And it does make each report different. And where do we draw the line with saying, well, that person's probably not relating a true story because abduction criteria doesn't show that. It doesn't back it up.
Well, that's a damn good question. It's also part of what we were talking about at the break as well. But criteria is important for a lot of reasons. One, it does help define who's telling the truth and who's lying, but it's not the only means the way we determine who a contactee or an abductee is. David asked me, too, at the break about researching, abductees versus non-abductees, who should be allowed to research contactees. In our organization, we use both. We use non-contactees and contactees as researchers, and there's a reason for that. The non-contactees keep the contactees honest because sometimes one contactee may perceive something differently than another one does and think that person may or may not be telling the truth. And sometimes it's a feeling, but contactees are also empathic. So 90% of the time, another contactee will recognize a contactee right off the bat. Sometimes they will even recognize them off the ships, but sometimes they'll recognize them into an emotional thing. So those are really important reasons why we use contactees. Plus, they also can empathize with a contactee or an abductee for what they've been going through. So it also makes the interview easier because the person understands what the contactee's been through. But you need to keep non-contactees involved just so you have a nice, clean frame of evidence. That way, one group is not overshadowing the other group. The evidence is being compared by each group, and what is being released is correct. Now, another thing when it comes to contactees, a criteria research is, yes, there's going to be a lot of things that are not the same in abduction cases. I have never, in 28 years interviewing abductees, found a case that matches perfectly. None of them ever do. There are basic things in abductions that you find similarities in. We know that they start pre-birth. We know what happens to children. Like we also know that some children have invisible friends. Probably 50 to 70% contactees have invisible friends as children, but not all of them do. So yes, it's a criteria, but it's not a criteria that says 100% that you're a contactee. We know that certain experiments start at puberty. For about 75 to 85% of all abductees will go through this, but there are some that do not. There are control groups and other groups that are working in other projects that this will not happen to. But we know these things. So what we're looking for, this is one of the reasons I get in trouble with the Hill cases about their abduction. The Betty and Barney Hill abduction does not match any known abduction on file to date. Okay? Doesn't mean they weren't abductees, but it does not match any file and date. So in reality, here you have a couple hundred, a couple thousand abductions by the kind of aliens they said, and this is how it happened to them. But in their case, it happened totally different. Odds are that the Hills were not correct in what they say. odds are that it's like we said originally, there's more than one set of memories there, and they're overlapping each other, and it's causing confusion. So we understand, and see, that's stuff we understand now. That's why we can look for outside interferences in contactees, whatever they may be, because this MILAB word really needs to be changed into something, because it's not Obama's military that's abducting people. It's not the American military per se that we perceive the American military. It's not what it is. If this group really truly exists like we think it is, this is probably ex-generals, ex-admirals, ex-congressmen, ex-businessmen, people that have an inside, turned-in link through some black ops where they're controlling this in a very limited fashion and in a very need-to-know type deal. So they're not even military. I don't even know what the hell you would call them or how you would even... We do know something's going on because contactees have these memories. At least some contactees have these memories. So this is also another reason to establish criteria, because now these experiences that these contactees that are having criteria are having these other things that are outside of the normal criteria. So we can also start tracking that as well. Now, it's not to say that from time to time a case won't pop up that's totally different than anything we deal with. So y'all know this, ladies and gentlemen, we don't throw a case out just because it doesn't meet ICAR's criteria standard. It's not how we do business. You have to understand there's a lot of things that go on here. Like you heard me talking, if we get a new case, we do have software, facial recognition for voice stress. We can use these kind of things to also help check contactee stories. Now, they're not 100%. They're about 90%. 80 to 90% depending on who's holding them, but it helps. It helps point you in a general direction of whether you should be wasting the rest of your time on this case or not. But still, 99% of the time when someone's case is completely and totally different than all the other thousands of tens of thousands of abduction cases on file, more than likely they're lying. Or they're not interpreting what they saw correctly, they're interpreting it differently. That's another need for having abductees on staff. Because when a new person comes in that has these different experiences, you can bring them in and put them in a room with contactees and at least get a sense of what the contactees think about the individual. Whether or not they feel like they take up the head. Yeah.
Joe, I've always felt that investigation into abduction should be done by a team, a group. And in the team, you should have, as you mentioned, a non-experiencer, because you need that outside point of view, but you should have an abductee who has passed a certain amount of abduction criteria to make you confident that they're the real deal on the team as well, and possibly someone trained in forensics. I think those three kinds of people on a team investigating abduction would make a great investigation team.
Oh, I agree. And forensics is something we've been looking at for a while. It is really something that we've been looking at for some people to get involved with. And recently we've had some applications that may turn out to be promising. Actually, that came after that show that you did, it was a couple months back. We started getting a few applications along those lines, so we'll see how they pan out. As a matter of fact, I'm talking to one of the guys out of the UK right now who's looking for a directorship job. So he's a forensic investigator, that's what he does for a living. And so he might come on board. So that'll help as well. And see, we get to cheat in ICAR because, frankly, there are a lot of contactees. A good case will come in. It'll usually be investigated by whoever's closest to the area, and then they'll usually talk to some of the other directors. It'll get passed around, or it'll get put in a database on the Homestead site or in one of the computers that handle this. But I got to tell you, being that a lot of the investigators and directors are contactees, you can't just come in and tell them, I'm an alien abductee. That's not going to float. You're going to have to come in and convince them. And abductees can't really convince anybody because they really haven't gone through the awakening enough to understand. That's another need for criteria, because when I'm talking to an abductee, not a contactee, but an abductee who only has fragmented memories, they may remember seeing some graves in some children as a kid. Or they may remember a particular something happening to them when they hit puberty. Or they might remember something else. But if they keyword in the criteria, then we know we can look at these people and ask them if they really want to dig into this deeper. Because frankly, and I say this to contactees and abductees every day, are you sure you want to remember? Because frankly, there is stuff in my own contacts that I would rather forget. I would rather not know about. And there are things in other abductees that I know they would rather not know about. So it's an important question before you go prying into an abductee's life. Is this really what you want to do? Because even like with Jim Sparks, you know, whether you believe or disbelieve what he is, there's a point there where he's talking about punishment and reward, which you hear from a lot of contactees. Well, the thing about that is, do you want to remember in some of the ways they may have punished you or some of the experiments they may have done along the breeding lines or the children lines or hybrid? Because I ask parents all the time, would you like to know if you had hybrid children? Would you like to know if you had children on board the ship? This is another common thing that happens with contactees. Do you want to remember that? Are you sure you want to know you're a contactee when you have children? Because, you know, until I was about 40, I wanted to take a 12 gauge and blow the Greys' heads off every time I thought about them coming and taking my son. So there's a lot of stuff here that you have to take into consideration before you even approach someone about remembering everything there is to remember. And frankly, I've put several contactees on the hot seat about this, which they get mad about. But, you know, I have contactees always tell me I can remember 80 or 100%. Well, I got to tell y'all guys, I would be considered a fairly advanced contactee if I'm lucky if I can remember 15 to 20%. And maybe on a good day, 30. I'm thinking more like 15 or 20%. And this is how you figure it out. Let's say that you started being abducted around age 16, which we know it starts pre-birth, but we're just going to estimate. And they abduct you 2 hours a week or 3 hours a week every week. That's or 15 hours a month. Okay, they abduct you 15 hours a month. All right, and it comes out to a couple hundred. What is that? 155, about 160 hours a year. And they do this over 10 years. This is 1,600 hours. You got 1,600 hours in memory? I don't think so. I can't find any contactees that have more than maybe 100 hours tops, maybe 200 hours if they're lucky, in a lifetime of abductions. Do you know how much time is missing there? Literally, I mean, it's hard to make people understand how many hours there are in a week, how many hours there are in a year, and so on and so forth. And over a lifetime, how many hours are actually spent with the aliens. David and I know sometimes you're taken for days. You might be gone all day and then brought back. That's 24 hours. You have 24 hours in memory that day? Look at Travis Walton. He can remember he's gone, 5 days? He remembers all of about 10 hours if he's lucky. And that's the point here. Even an advanced contactee is not going to have that much recall, 50, 100 hours. That's about all they're going to have. They're going to probably have 10 or 15,000, 20,000 hours of abduction. But all they're going to remember is a couple of maybe 100 hours. So it's a tough one, and it is one of the reasons I give contactees a hard time when they start telling me how they know all of this all the time. So anyway,
Joe, let me say this about abduction criteria. In my opinion, it is very, very important that we try to establish it, because if you can't establish something as a baseline, then how the hell can you research this? Are we just supposed to believe every Tom, Dick, and Harry that says, I've been abducted, I've seen aliens, and just believe everything across the board? I mean, we're not going to learn anything that way.
No, we're not. We're going to be lost. And we're going to make mistakes. That's the point there, David. I mean, we can't say we're not going to make mistakes. I have personally, anybody who's followed me over the years knows, on at least 3 occasions or 4 occasions, I have changed what I think or believe about a particular alien race or what's going on. You have to be willing to admit, hey, we messed up, and we need to move on. It's one of the reasons I give the whole case so much hell, because it was obviously mistakes made, and ufology is not willing to stand up for the mistakes made and move forward. They want to keep on the same old BS and leave it at that. You can't do that. You know, this is an expanding, growing field. It's like when ICAR broke the gain time versus lost time thing. Ufology didn't want to accept it. They wanted to fight it the whole damn way. Now they accept it 15 years later or 12 years later, however the hell long it is. And even now, you know as well as I do, they still kind of fight it. Even though we've got literally hundreds of contactees that this has happened to, they still want to fight the fact that it's going on. The fact that ET adjusted to our investigation method. And I don't mean just ours, I mean everybody who was in the field. They adjusted. And no, I'm not answering that question about David Jacobs. Y'all can just forget that. I'm not even going there.
Hey, if you don't mind, here's a question that's related to what we're talking about here, and I'd like to throw it in there, and I'll let you answer it first. This is from Instant Karma, or Jason Wilson, and he's asking what percentage of people that claim they've had alien contact have actually had credible alien contact, and what defines credible contact?
Oh, that's a tough one. Leave it to Jason. Well, first off, for us, it's probably 1 in 5, 1 in 6 individuals that reported actually turn out to be real. For other organizations, it's probably much higher. I would venture for organizations like MUFON, it's probably 1 in 50, because frankly, they just don't have the skills that we do for this. So I think they get fooled a lot more often. And what was the second part of the question? Damn, I forgot. I'm going brain.
It says what percentage have had claim they've had contact or actually had credible contact? What defines credible contact? So it went back to abduction criteria, I believe.
Yeah, that's what defines credible contact, is abduction criteria. And we're not going to get this right all the time, and there may be a case from time to time that slips through the cracks. I really don't think so, though, because I think with using a combination of contactees and non-contactees as researchers, I don't think we're going to lose a contactee because of the abduction criteria. And look, guys, abduction criteria changes. It grows. Recently, with Demi's new study of the graves, we've added some new stuff, and we've actually changed some stuff because one thing we learned early on, and I don't know why the old abduction researchers don't understand this, but ET changes. They change and react to what we're doing, and we change and react to what we're doing with the things. A long time ago, we started talking about programming contactees to ask questions from the aliens. They learned and adapt from that. Now, it's done differently because, frankly, they've adapted to it. They know that we're going to do these kind of things. So, they do adapt and they do change according to what the research is doing. So you have to be tracking this stuff in order to have a criteria that allows you to see and understand that, yes, something did just change. Something new is going on. They're trying something new, or this new type of experiment's going on. It's like following the hybrids. If you go back to, this has always weirded me out a little bit too, by the way, but if you go back to the 50s, hybrids in the 50s were beautiful human-type aliens. Hybrids in 2010 are not quite beautiful looking aliens, so I'm not sure why I went backwards there. But it made sense to me, actually, because it suggested to me that E.T. wasn't trying to create something that looked like us. They were trying to create something that looked like them. See, that was that human ego thing. For decades, we thought they were trying to make themselves look like, oh, no, that is not what they're trying to do. They're cloning something, or not cloning, but they're taking something from us and adding it to their self. That's what they're actually doing.
I agree with that.
And that's an important thing.
That's
what criteria is for. Okay.
Joe, I also think that whatever this is they're doing, it has 100% to do with why they abduct in family lines.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. I think that is why. Whether or not, there's going to be some new stuff coming out on the blood type study that will help add to some of this conversation that Dave and I are having tonight. But they abducted family lines from way back whenever this started, whether it was because they interbred with the population and they came back and started going back to those family lines to use that to help create whatever that there is they're creating or looking for, or interbreeding with other alien lines and looking for it. But there's no doubt that they abducted family lines for specific reasons, and it has more to do with how they're trying to engineer this for themselves than anything else. And it would be like, for example, growing a virus over, viruses grow real fast, so a virus that grows over a week mutates several thousand times. Well, that's basically what they're doing with us. They're basically going through, they started back 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 years ago, whenever it was, and they have simply been going through using those family lines, progressing those family lines, psychic abilities and other abilities and things like that, taking that, interbreeding it again at another point and creating another hybrid. They haven't quite got what they're looking for yet, but they seem to be getting closer, because I noticed last 2 times I heard about hybrids, they were much closer to looking like the aliens than looking like us. So, and don't ask, because I don't know why they're doing it. I don't have a clue.
Can I jump here with something? Then I'd like to answer Jason's question myself. And Jason, what you posted in the room, that's my opinion as well. And I get in trouble for my opinion a lot, but I think that 10% of the people that claim to be abductees really are. But again, that's my opinion. Now, Joe, I want to back you in a corner on something. So get ready. The stories about mill labs, the stories about hybrids. Now, particularly, let's start with hybrids. Mm-hmm. When I was looking into this a while back, I noticed some of the earliest reports you hear of someone describing what looked like a hybridized child were coming from the 70s. But in almost every single instance I found, they said, I saw one child. And as this topic progressed, and you hear a person saying, well, no, I saw 5. And then the next person, well, no, I saw 12. And then the next person says, well, I saw a whole room full of hybrid kids in test tubes and blah, blah, blah. And I think the same thing is occurring with mill labs. And I want to know your opinion. How much of accounts of mill labs and hybrids do you think are genuine, and how much of it is just somebody wanting to jump on the bandwagon with the latest buzzword in abduction research?
I would have to say the overall majority are total and absolute garbage, and that's what they are, looking for attention. There are a few cases, and I mean a few cases, where there seems to be some interference by some organization. But this isn't by any means the norm, or actually I found mostly this happened in famous contactees. Contactees that came out tend to have a lot of these problems. And there are a few that had these problems prior. But first off, the government has to know, or whoever this is has to know that you're an abductee. How the hell are they going to find that out? Unless they already knew about your family line, how are they going to find this out? So it seems to be a very select and a very few. And to be honest with you, they're not looking for Joe abductee or Joe contactee. They're looking for the advanced Joe contactee, the ones that do stuff on the ships, the ones that do understand some of the agendas, the ones that may have been involved with the teacher or using the plasma or knows the redheaded doctor or whatever. That's the ones they're looking for, because that's the ones that can answer their questions. The everyday abductee is worthless to them. They don't know anything. There's no reason for them to pick them up. And the only reason I ever, I thought that they may have got the hills was the fact that it was such a new thing, and the CDC standard back then wasn't the CDC, actually it was the military back then, but their standard was anything like that going on, they would have instantly wanted to get skin and hair and nail and fluid samples. So, that actually made sense to me. And I can understand today a need to know, certain contactees, Leah Haley, Kay Wilson, people like that may have had long-term exposure or had been on ships for long terms. They may have an interest in. They may have knowledge that could help them out. Now, that's assuming that these people we're talking about are legitimate contactees. If they're not, then they wouldn't be bothering with them. And there are, I think, some researchers they do harass because they get too close to the truth, or they talk about things that they shouldn't do. But I don't think it's this big, huge conspiracy that everybody thinks it is. I don't think the military's taking thousands of people at a time and rooting them off to these places. I just don't think that's what's going on. And I do think from time to time, the Greys, I can't say this for the other two, but the Greys from time to time will let a group of these people come in and work in a particular area, maybe to oversee, maybe as a control group study or whatever. But from time to time, I do think that goes on. So for me, it's going to be less than 2% of the people who report this are real. That's why it's so hard to even take it serious.
Joe, let me add this to the question I just asked you, that just kind of put this on the end of it here. You and I both know, and it's kind of common knowledge to some of the ICAR people here. I don't think I'm giving away any abduction criteria by saying this. I think we've both talked about this on air before, but we know for a fact that sometimes, and the Greys in particular will do this, they will make the abductee think that they're seeing a long-lost relative or an old friend they haven't seen in 20 or 30 years, and we come to find out that it's actually a telepathic trick, and it's not the person they think they're seeing, it's actually one of the ETs. So this being something we've discovered, how many cases do you think of a mill lab or somebody saying, I saw a military person, is actually the ET making them think they're seeing that?
Well, see, that's the thing. It could be as far as all of the cases. There's no way you can rule that out 100%. because we do know they do make people see things that they weren't. The problem here is not so much that we know they can do it, but more along the facts of why they would do it. Now, we do know they like to do deceptions, and we do know there is some disinformation out there. So it would come down to that. But I would even think inside of that, even probably, there's probably a chunk of them that do it. For whatever reason, there probably is a chunk. The only things we have these days is we have some cases we know because of the facilities, not so much because of the aliens, but like the Gulf Reef facility. There are about a dozen people that are in the field of ufology right now. All of them have had the same experience in Gulf Reef, Florida, at the same military facility. Now, if I wouldn't have personally been to this facility myself, I could say maybe, maybe not. But since I've been there personally, I know this is a military base. I know both the military and the Grays were present here, or black ops, who they were wearing black pants, black shirts, and black hats and black boots. So I don't know who the hell they were actually. But still, so I know that is physically there. So we also know those bases there. So we know in some cases, the biggest problem here is one, why are they taking these few people, and what do they hope to achieve from them? And I got to be honest with you, Dave, I don't think they take them all the time. I don't think they're randomly taking these people every day or every week like the aliens do. I think every once in a blue moon, for whatever reason, whatever triggers it, they come by and they get this individual and they bring him somewhere. They sit them down, they drug them up, whether it's on sodium pentothal or some kind of cocktail of drugs, and they ask them. And recently, we have had 3 mill labs that had blood work done that showed a mixture of sodium pentothal and whatever it is that makes up Xanax were actually in their blood. So we actually got the lab reports for that now. So we know those 3 cases for sure legitimate. But other than that, I don't know. And it's a tough one because even when I'm talking about this subject, because I was telling David earlier, I got a good plug for mill labs, and the person that had done it, I had asked him not to plug me that way because, frankly, I do think there are some organization out there that from time to time messes with a few of our contactees. But I think it's a very small, very, very tight-knit group of people that they're messing with. And I really think that most of these people know each other. Well, let me rephrase that. I think in the areas of the country where these are actually going on, they know each other. And then there's the fact that we have now had outside of the country military experiences happen. Kind of makes me wonder what's going on now. In Europe, a lot of times they say they see French people. I don't know what the hell that's about. I've got reports out of Germany and England talking about French military. I'm still trying to figure out what the hell that is.
Joe, let me.
See, that's probably a dream. Go ahead.
Let me throw this in there. But why I just asked you that about, could they possibly be making people think that's what they're seeing? If you see 1 or 2 or 3 little Grays and you can still move, are you going to try to fight back and run or whatever, try to get away? But what if you're seeing half a dozen military people with guns? In which instance are you going to be more likely to just sit there and keep your mouth shut and not try to resist?
Right. Yeah,
which is more threatening to you?
But to me, the Grays are more threatening. See, I like when they got me. Well, no, when they got me a Gulf Reef, I know for sure the guy on the right side. I know I broke his nose, and I probably broke the guy on the left side of the ankle because I wasn't going peacefully because they were human. See, that's the difference. Once you're a contact, you know the Grays can grab you by your ankle, little 3-foot, and drag you around, beat you up against the walls like you're nothing. So for the new contactees, they may have fear of the military, but for the older guys, oh no, they don't scare me. Them little Grays, I can't say on the air.
Do you understand why I asked that? Why
yeah, I do.
I put it that way?
Point. But it's a good point because I'm sure at least part of these are exactly that. And there's some other stuff that goes on that in like certain kind of contexts is why some of the abductees sound so much crazier than other ones do. Because I think in some instances they give them those images to make them think that way and feel that way. I don't know why. I mean, there's no real good explanation for it, but they do seem to do it because there's no rational explanation why some contactees are so far left or right than all the rest of them are. I mean, we'll do this real basic. We'll use the Grays. We'll do this real basic. Okay. Pre-childhood abduction. Childhood abduction, either with invisible friends or seeing children aboard the craft or being out in fields or being in those circle things. Common in a Gray abduction as a child. Also, little buggy things, cloaked people, red-eyed stuff, all common in the gray-eyed stuff. People coming out their closets, all stuff you hear. Contactees, child contactees. Okay, this is basic stuff, guys, for most contactees in this situation. Puberty hits. We start hearing about experiments with the little melting machine, things taking ovaries and eggs, all kinds of things being inserted in all holes in your body, things like that. Common stuff inside, I think. Emotional experiments, physical experiments, learning techniques, stuff like this. All stuff we hear common in the grade 20 contactees. Giving knowledge and helping and awakening in the 30s. It's all stuff we hear common in grade abduction. So the criteria leads us from one point to the other point to the other point to the other point, and it helps us to determine, look, hey, when this oddball report does come in where none of this stuff has happened, but yet the contactees and even some of the keyword stuff does suggest that this person has been contacted, you have to stop. Why? What is the difference? What makes this person different from everybody else? Why are they doing something different? And can you look in their family line and find out abductions? That's the first thing. If you have somebody come in and they tell you all this BS and there is no history of any of this in their family, you can pretty much bet they're lying to you. You can pretty much take it to the bank. It's a 95% chance that individual is lying, because I have not met a contactee to date that this does not show up in their family somewhere. So
I agree
that's
with that.
another reason criteria is important, because through criteria we learn that this is abduction in family lines, that these things go on in families. And yeah, some kids remember more than others, or how could I say this in a nicer way? Some children choose to remember, some children just don't want to remember. I've been in families, with big families, actually 5, 8 kids in them, where some of the kids have excellent recognition of what happened. And the other ones are like, no, that's never happened. And we know it has because they're in that family. We know it's happened to them. But they're not going to ever admit it to themselves, which is fine. They don't have to. Because, sometimes you don't want to live with this. It's not the easiest thing to deal with on a regular basis. I need to eye in Jimmy. Jimmy, send me your guest info. That way I don't eye in you.
I got it here if you wanted to. I know we're running out of time here a little bit.
Like 3 minutes.
Actually you touched on something just now that I'm thinking about writing a new article on, and it kind of surprised me when I started discovering this. And this is not necessarily true for every abductee, but for quite a few of the ones that I've talked to that are lifelong abductees that have had experiences starting in childhood, a lot of their clearest memories, for some weird reason, are from childhood.
Yeah.
And I start scratching my head and say, well, what the heck is that about? You'd think an adult would have a clearer perception of details and this and that and the other thing. And actually, in a lot of cases, it's the other way around.
Let's do it.
And so, I'm thinking, well, is that possible? And I recently came across an article that are saying a few researchers have discovered that, at least in a court case, that a child's testimony may actually be more credible than people want to admit. So that has to make me wonder why do people remember more clearly as a child than they might as an adult? Is there something different?
Well, there's a lot of things different, but in this case, I think
we know contact changes, especially around puberty. From puberty on, it changes in a lot of cases.
Well, in most cases, it doesn't seem like the children, and about 98% of the cases I've investigated, the children don't seem to get scared. Even my own son, we're standing there, we know we're getting ready to get abducted. Me and Linda's about to all over ourselves. And my son's like, oh, my little bug-eyed friends are coming. I'm thinking, huh? If I wouldn't have heard from my
glad you mentioned that. I'm glad you mentioned that, really.
So it's an important thing to realize that the kids don't seem to be as scared, and they're not really harming the children, which says something about them, actually. I bitch all the time about you got to judge them by their actions, and you do. Yeah. And abduction's a bad thing, but the fact that they're not hurting the kids does say something about them.
It does.
So people have to take that in consideration when they're getting their heart. It's pretty harsh on myself. But, yeah.
I tell people all the time, I think part of this reason of the way they act with children as opposed to when the abductee enters their adult years is that adults have learned fear. Our society teaches us be afraid of this or don't be afraid of that or whatever. And children don't have that aspect. They're still learning that. And I think that causes these beings, whoever and whatever they are, to be a little more open with them.
And I think you're right, too. I think it's exactly what it is.
Joe, when's the last time you heard of a lifelong abductee say that they experienced the immobilization that you get sometime when they were a kid, as opposed to when they were an adult?
As far as I know, there's one little case that somebody talks about, but as far as I know, there aren't any, as far as I'm concerned. I can't say the rest of ufology, so don't start hating on me, people. But in my own personal experiences, I don't have any kids being restrained, not before puberty. All of them seem to have the free will to walk around the ship, do what they wanted to. Sometimes the kids will say they were startled, but then they were okay, and they even showed how they let them play with psychic experiments, and there's this one room where they can try to, like, make the ball hover back and forth and hit each other. It's like dodgeball without using your hands. I just haven't heard it. There was one case I heard about a kid being immobilized, but it wasn't, I think it was a necessity more than anything else, because something happened. The mother was telling me about it. When the kid was being taken, the father freaked out and was trying to stab the gray and actually caught the kid and sliced the kid down the forearm. And then the Grays immobilized the kid. So I figured they immobilized him to fix him. I don't think they did it. But that's the only case that I have where it even was mentioned.
You know, Joe, in my own personal experiences, I can only think of one time as a child where I was immobilized. I think it directly had something to do with that particular experience, what they were trying to do or accomplish.
It was probably better to immobilize you than not to. That's probably what that was early. But you know what? I don't even get as many cases as adults as I used to being immobilized. I think because of, and I hate to say this because it's going to make it sound like I got a big ego, but I really think because of ICAR, a lot more people realize that they don't have to be as scared. There's not as much fear. You know, basically all of us say the same things. Look, guys, it's not going to always be pleasant. It's not going to always be bad, but they almost always bring you back and usually let you forget. So, and I think that's a message that's been getting out a lot, and a lot more people are being more relaxed. Because I got to say, a lot more contactees I talk to now said earlier on, but now that they've accepted it, they don't seem to get it. Usually, like the girl in Africa just the other day, she writes to me, she said, yeah, I heard what you said, I agree. She said, now when they come in, I said, I'm ready, take me. So she said, usually they just come up and take her by the hand, she'll stand up, she feels like weightlessness, and they just kind of carry her along by taking her hand, but she's not immobilized or anything. And I've heard this a lot in the last 5 or 6 years, so I think that's what it's from. I can't be 100% sure. Or maybe they just changed.
Joe, you know, I've both encountered a lot of people that have come into the chat room or given you a call or dropped you an email or whatever, says, you know, this is going on in my life. What the hell can I do about it? And, you know, it kind of hurts you because you're like, well, you know, if they're going to come and take you, they're going to come and take you, and there really ain't a damn thing you can do about it. But as far as trying to be proactive, one thing you can try to do is not to be as afraid. And usually they're like, what the hell? How can I not be afraid of these people, these things, whatever they are? But that's one of the best things I think you can advise any abductee or contactee. Try to force yourself not to be afraid. And whenever the person has done that, as you just pointed out, their experiences change a little bit.
Yeah, they do. And actually, to cap it next, I know Dave's getting ready to close this out. Really, guys, if you can get past the fear and start to communicate, they will let you remember a lot more. And you can even ask questions and get more involved. Nice to see you, Dennis. But you really can get more involved in what's going on and have a much better understanding. And when you achieve that point, you can help out researchers like us because they have the information that we're looking for. That's the kind of people that get the information that we're looking for, the ones that are relaxed and willing to go along with the program. I'm not saying bend over and let them probe you people to the person who just wrote that to me, but still, cooperation is better in these cases because you can fight all you want. I've fighted them, I've cussed them, I've shot guns, I've done all kind of stuff, and let me tell you what, the Gray didn't seem to be impressed, and neither the Reptilian for that matter. They're like, whatever, dude, you come in with us. It's too damn bad. Oh, wait, we're going to take your kid, too. So, you know, at a point you come to the time where you realize, don't fight, understand, and ask questions, and learn. And I got to say, ever since that point, my empathic ability has improved better, my telepathic abilities have improved better. Overall understanding of what they're doing has improved, even though it's not 100% any means. But I know I got to shut out because we done run over like 4 minutes in Jimmy's time, and she's going to hurt me and David here in a minute.
Alrighty. Well, Jill, I want to thank you for being my guest tonight, and I want to thank my dear wife for letting me take over the show tonight. I've had a blast, and great questions from the people in the audience, and you guys have been great. Thank you very, very much. That's all the time we have for tonight, and stay tuned for Voice of the People, hosted by November Hanson. Her guest tonight is author Louis Charles. Please join us again next Saturday for Eye to the Sky, the UFO Synopsis. Deandra, the regular host, will be back, and her guests will be Stanton Frieden and Kathleen Martin. Should be a great show. Until then, keep an eye to the sky, everyone. Good night.